Hi, and welcome to Forward Ever, leading in challenging times. As you know, our program talks about challenging times, and it seems like this time of year, some of the biggest challenges are in Topeka, and that's with our state government. Our legislative session takes place, and we have our guest today, our 110th District Representative, Ken Rogers, with us. And Ken, I was looking at the kind of the calendar going back a couple of years. You were appointed to this position back in 2015. It's hard to believe you're going into now your 10th year. Congratulations and thank you for all your efforts.
Well, thank you so much. It does, I think we all are a little surprised that it has been that long. Time, I guess, flies when you work hard every day, or I would say fun. But if people thought this job was fun, maybe a lot more people want to do it. But no, it's been my privilege. I was able to spend some time with the folks in Graham County recently, and the things that they're doing. We have so many good things, Gary, that's going on in Northwest Kansas. People are, really wanting to move their communities forward. And that's what's exciting. It doesn't take, government intervention and other things. And so it's great that we can kind of help be a part of that in any way.
We know what we've seen, and can you see that? You represent Northwest Kansas. But as you take a look at those things, trying to find the right leadership in each community and the people that get the work done, that's what makes Kansas work. I'm going to be back in Clay Center earlier this week, and boy, the streets were all cleaned off. There wasn't any snow, and it just goes down to good people who work hard. And I think we have that in Topeka. Not everybody sees the same thing, but everybody's there to work hard. You're there to represent us in Northwest Kansas, but you're also there to represent Kansans as a whole and try to find the right way to get things done. So we'll want to jump right to it. I thank you for jumping in here because you're on a way to another meeting and actually parked in a church parking lot talking to me. So
Yes.
I love that farm boy ingenuity that I see there. So
Hey, it's whatever it takes to get the job done. That's what we see, Gary. And as we look at the session, you're going to ask me some questions, but we go back to November and the general election. We were very fortunate to win by a large percentage, and so people were talking about, well, what happens next? And I said, well, here's what happens. Still, as elected official moving forward, you still have to govern. And I stayed up late like a lot of people did, but you know what? I had two meetings in Hayes that Wednesday morning. So I got up, did my early morning things, and was meeting all day. So it's one of those things that it is. I think it's that farm boy, if you will, attitude and work ethic that hopefully has been proven successful in some of the things we've been able to get done.
well, let's go through the farm boy look at what we need to happen. First off, though, I know taxes are going to, I hear a lot about that, especially property taxes. Everybody's looked at their tax bill. We just paid it a few weeks
Mhm.
ago, and you're going, ouch, 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 ouch. And not so much that it's a big number, but it's so much bigger than it was the year before. I assume taxes in general are going to be something that you guys take a look at.
I do. I think before the November election, I was thinking probably this year might be one of just sheer education and really looking at 26 to be the big year. But what we saw in the national level with President Trump coming and winning re-election, that set the tone then for taxes all over from a federal to a state standpoint. So yes, our leadership and both House and Senate has said our top priority is property tax, which I think is good, Gary. One thing I have been a strong advocate for is, you know, doing everything we can to give property tax relief. The state can't do a whole lot, but there are some things that we can do. We do have some money. We've done a pretty good job of budgeting. We do have some money that can be used for that. We hope that that happens, but we also need to look at ways of how we can help our counties. And instead of having this blame game of the state and the counties and everybody blaming each other, let's work together for solutions. And I know that sounds kind of cliche, and we've heard that a lot recently. But I believe there's some things that we can work on. As we get down to Topeka, we'll know exactly what the numbers are. Um, some of us like to maybe go a little deeper, but we also have to be responsible. And that's what I hope that with this new generation of lawmakers coming in, 20 some in the House and 10 or so in the Senate, that we can uh, talk about governing. Not talk about throwing bombs and not to talk about throwing, things to play gotcha, but really govern. And while I would love to give a huge chunk back in property tax relief, we also know there are other things that we have to invest in as a state. And we can bring relief back to citizens, but also make sure that the basic needs are being met. And that's one of the things I think that I have proven that we've done and we will continue to do. And what that means some tough conversations. And I think we've already started that days before. I think every year, Gary, uh, the legislative mode starts a little bit earlier. And quite honestly, if they call it a part-time deal, but it's really full-time. I would guess almost every day I can have a quote real job, as I say, but I would guess every day I do something with a legislative bent to it, and that's okay.
I was at 4 days graduation a couple of weeks ago, and you were there. But we have a whole new generation of young people graduating, going out into the workforce, trying to get there and get a job. And I think that's the other part. How do we make our state so that it is young people, young business friendly, so that somebody wants to go and start a small business? Right now, it's a challenge. Taxes, insurance, all those things almost make it not impossible, but certainly a challenge to grow a business in Kansas.
It is, and I think we have seen folks like Fort Hayes and some of our private foundations and some of the government agencies kind of working together. And how can we put all those pieces in place? One of the things I think you're going to see out of this legislative session is another revamp of looking at regulations in the state and trying, obviously safety, security are paramount in this situation. But as we look at moving forward, are there regulations that are hampering that entrepreneurial spirit? Not maybe just in Western Kansas, but all over the state. And we have such great young minds. We want to keep them in Kansas. And I think sometimes we go, well, I had a struggle, so I don't know if I want that next generation to have that struggle. Well, I believe there are enough pieces together that we can, because quite honestly, I've been in many conversations and meetings of looking at service sector jobs and trying to bridge the gap between some of our good employers, say in the Hayes area, and as they look at what the next generation is going to be, and working with some of these nonprofits of how can we bridge that gap. I mean, those are exciting things. I don't really care who gets credit for it, but I want to make sure that if we need folks in the HVAC business in some of our small rural communities, we can have that. If we need, they're talking about, we do. I never thought this would be the case where we have a shortage of attorneys in rural Kansas. But that's a thing. We have doctors, accountants, this whole situation. But one of the keys is taking a serious look at our regulations and what we're doing, and really getting a hold of our legislation. What has happened over time is that we have let you know those that write the rules and regulations not follow legislative intent, and we have got to get control of that. And I think that's one thing you'll see us really work on this year.
Well, that goes right into something else. When you work together, you have to have the governor's office involved as well. And how close are the Republicans to working with the governor to actually making progress, or is that where the real rubber meets the road on this? It's going to be hard changing her
Um,
attitude.
it's after the election, I think it was virtually impossible. I think you're saying some maybe defrosting of that, if you will. I've been in conversations with folks in her office. I want to work together. There is a supermajority in both the House and Senate that really the governor can do what she wants, but the legislature really is going to drive the bus. But I do think there are some things that uh, we would need her leadership to work together on some of these things, and so those are things that I'm trying to look at. I'm more of a legislative math type guy. It takes 85 in the House, 27 in the Senate, and 1 governor to be successful in legislating. And that's the whole thing. I use that word legislating. It's more than just getting elected and wearing a tie and saying, look at me and how shiny my shoes are, but it's really getting to work and doing what's right for the people. And that is what I hope. I don't really care about what goes on around the rest of the country and all the different things that are thrown about. People they want to drag state legislators into that stuff. Those are federal things. We're trying to worry about how you know, Mr. and Mrs. Kansas citizen, can feel safe, make sure your kids or grandkids have a good education, and those things are funded properly. And so, those are, um, as you can tell, Gary, I mean, those are still my passions. That hasn't changed.
So what's the battle between East and West Kansas? Is that, I know it's still there. Is that still a thing when you talk about making major changes? Medicaid expansion is going to fall right into the middle of that. That may be a Western Kansas thing almost more than it is Eastern Kansas, just because of who's there. I don't know, but where does that all play in? And does East and West? I know you have good relationships
Right.
across the state, but what's it going to take to get all of Kansas involved?
Well, I think the example of Medicaid expansion, I think as long as leadership is where it is, that's an issue that will not be discussed. I know the governor's going to propose it in her state of the state, and she has every right to do that. What we're going to continue to do, Gary, is what we've done in the past. And many of us advocate for better reimbursement rates and working with CMS out of Kansas City so that we can do that, because those are things that can make positive impacts in keeping our critical access hospitals open. Now that's different than Hayes Med, and that's a whole other issue unto itself. But what the urban rural east west, I mean, it's still there, but really the Western legislators have done a pretty good job of being in positions of important chairmanships. And so we are very much at the table of moving things forward. Also, locally, Representative Wassinger, who has City of Hayes, Victoria, she is also on Appropriations Committee now with me. So we have two strong ones from right here on appropriations, and that's where all the money flows and all the decisions are made about that. So I think that will be a strength. We're both now off higher ed, so as far as to be a strong advocate right on the front line, helping Fort Hayes, but we're still there, as that'll be discussed during the appropriation. So what it is meetings, and it is trying to find common ground and realizing that while yes, we need Johnson County and we need Wichita, we need the aviation industry, we need food. And we need a strong Western Kansas. As I've said, a strong Western Kansas equals a strong Kansas. And so it does not get lost. And these freshmen are going to hear about it from the old man now, starting here in just a couple of days.
Boy, if I didn't know better, it sounds like you're running for governor.
Gary, I tell you, you kind of caught me there.
Everybody else, well, not everybody, but there's been a lot of talk about who's going to be running for governor, and there's people who've already thrown their hat in. But what you just said is being a strong Kansas, that plays right into that role, Ken.
Well, there are a lot of opportunities. I think there are a lot of folks that will be looking at that opportunity if there is. I believe it's time for somebody from Western Kansas to be at Cedar Crest and to be on the second floor. I think it brings that sensibility to it. I think like a lot of people were looking at it, but right now our concentration is not doing anything except representing the 110th district and the citizens of Kansas, being the chairman of the Agriculture Committee and making agriculture strong.
Well, that's what we needed to peak. And again, appreciate your work there. We want to take a quick break, Ken. We'll come back. I want to find out how, one, if you're hearing anything from the voters specifically as you're out running around. You mentioned Graham County, you're here in Ellis County today. What are you hearing? And then how do they get in touch? I always like to do this because some people say, boy, I don't know how to get a hold of him. Well, shoot, I went over and introduced myself and said, hi, Ken, over at the Fort Hays State thing. You're everywhere. How do they do that? So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back on Forward Ever, leading in challenging times with our guest, 110th District Representative Ken Rogers. Back after this.
Since 1776, the United States of America continues to stand tall. It's been tested before, many times. Through grit and the ability to move forward, We create better tomorrows. We help our clients live their best lives to and through retirement. We make it easier. Thank you, Kansas. Worth Wealth Management, enhancing lives and strengthening families.
And welcome back to Forward Ever, leading in challenging times, brought to you by Worth Wealth Management. Our guest today, leading in challenging times in Topeka, from Western Kansas, more specifically Northwest Kansas, representing us in the 110th district. Ken Rogers is our guest. And so, Ken, we went into the break talking about not only the challenges looking forward, but what are you hearing when you travel Northwest Kansas? Property taxes, one. What else is on that list of things that you want to talk about when you get to Topeka?
Well, I think obviously taxes is the number one thing, and to make sure we have a good tax policy, people want to say, hey, give me a good tax policy. They want to make sure their tax dollars are being used correctly. Schools is still a big thing. Concerned about protecting our really small schools. And, I represent, Hayes High, but then I have a lot of small schools other than once you get to Hayes, and you have Norton at 3A, and then Plainville, then I have a bunch of 2A and a bunch of 1A schools. And so we continue to have that conversation to make sure, and honestly, I encourage people to become teachers. Go back into that second career, go to Fort Hays, come back and be a local teacher. Those are some of the keys. The other thing, Gary, water. Water. We continue to have this conversation about water. And in the House, water has its own committee. While I'm not on that committee, still being chair of Ag and Natural Resources, I've been knee deep in these conversations and trying to make sure really to protect irrigators, but to protect the water quality, the water supply for Western Kansas, and really all the states. So water, people want to make sure they have clean water, available water, and water to irrigate, and also working on the R9 situation, doing everything we can, which is really more of a cheerleader right now than anything else, but to make sure that those things are moving forward. So, that's kind of it. And then just assuring people there's a lot of national things going on that people they're trying to understand. And so I've done a lot of trying to just reassure people that history has a tendency to repeat itself, and we've been through different kind of administrations, Republicans, Democrats, and so on. I can remember we've just celebrated the life of former President Carter. I was in school then. I remember vividly the day in Russell, Kansas, when Gerald Ford brought Bob Dole back home to introduce him as a vice presidential running mate. My dad pushed me up in a tree directly west of the courthouse, which one of the things that stirred me to be involved in politics at a very young age. But, and going through that whole process and knowing that, the ups and downs we've seen over the last 40 to 50 years, and that, the bottom line is, and in one of my meetings, we talked about the bottom line is we're all Kansans, we're all Americans. Don't let the hyper alleged disagreements tear a family or tear a community apart. A lot of this stuff you see on television is for show, Gary. It is. It's a show, and it's not real life. Real life is going to a ball game. Real life is going to that parent-teacher conference. Real life is going to church, going to the PTA meeting, going to that chili supper, which we'll do a lot of chili suppers and pancake feeds this winter and enjoy every one of them. And that, to me, is real life.
And most even shoveling your neighbor's drive or helping them do that. That's what we're all about in Kansas. And I appreciate you bringing that part of Kansas forward, because we do have something special here. As a Kansan, and certainly you're native, I am too, and you grow up with that kind of great feeling about our state. Let's keep it that way. Ken, how does somebody get a hold of you?
I'm easy to find. Probably the best thing to do is just Google me. I'm all over the place. My phone number is right there, but you can get a hold of me. My cell number is no big secret, 785 302-8416. Yes, I do take calls at night, and I've spent many a Saturday on the phone with folks that have concerns. You can text me there as well, or Ken Rogers at Gmail, or I believe it's ken.rogers at is it house.ks.gov? I don't know. I don't, but I have anyway. Google me. I'm all over the place, and I'm easy to find and hopefully accessible. And if you see me at Dillon's or at Walmart, come up to me. I have one thing I've noticed, Gary, is if I have my jeans and a sweater and a ball cap on, I'm almost invisible. So, but if I'm dressed up, people think, as we do out here in my in my khakis and my boots and my little button down
Fancy
shirt,
tie.
they know they yeah, and the tie, they come, which again is fine. I enjoy it, and I enjoy spending the extra time because that's really where you make that connection, that eye to eye, that one-on-one. That relationship is so important.
It is, Ken, and thank you for taking the time to do this. I know you skidded off the road, found a spot. You're doing your show from there, or that part of it, this show from there. So I appreciate that, Ken. Appreciate all you do, the hard work you do in Topeka. Don't be a stranger. Call us if you see something, or let us know so that we can kind of follow up later on. If you see something, let us know. But appreciate all you do for us in Kansas, especially those in Northwest Kansas, because I know it takes an immense amount of time and leadership. And now that you're in the, I'll say, the 10-year status or more, do you get a special pin for that?
No, but I don't have to move my office. So that's an award to itself, I think.
Way to go. All right, Ken, take care. Be safe out there, and appreciate you being on our show.
As always, appreciate it, Gary. Thank you.
Ken Rogers, our guest, representing the 110th District here in Northwest Kansas, in the state of Kansas. He's been our guest, and our program is brought to you by Worth Wealth Management, where you can live with confidence. I'm Gary Shorman.
Thanks for joining us for Forward Ever, Leading in Challenging Times, presented by Worth Wealth Management. Join us right here next week for another episode with host Gary Shorman. Until then, remember to move forward ever, backward never.